Absolute Brainiac has finally been revealed in the Absolute Superman title, so hold on to your butts, because his origin is a horror show. What's up, everybody? Writer Jason Aaron has been giving us one great issue after another with Absolute Superman, and issue 7 is definitely no different, as it finally brings this universe's Brainiac out of the shadows. The issue also tells us why this Brainiac is so interested in the last son of Krypton, and sets things up for the start of a brand new story arc in issue 8. But why tease when we can just jump right in? Issue 7 starts off in the Nevada desert, where we see the Omega Men saying, "Strike force to Primus, have breached the compound, going radio silent, synchronizing cortexes. Omega, keep your implants clear of emostatic, no signs of life, facility appears deserted. The kind of power this place pulls from the grid, they must be hiding something here, something big." Another Omega Man then says, "If it's the server cluster that runs the Brainiac algorithm, there's no way Lazarus leaves the place unguarded. So stay alert, find that server, shut down Brainiac." Nothing can stop the Omega Men, but as he says that, he gets zapped and we see the armor and skin melt off his body. Another Omega Man then asks, "What was that? What just happened to Call?" But a totally separate voice answers, "Why, I shrank his skin, of course." As we see, it's clearly Brainiac who shoots more Omega Men with his purple blasts. The panicked Omega Men then begin to say, "The network is compromised, someone's inside." But before they can finish their sentence, one of the men who got blasted says, "Can't move, can't even open my eyes. It's like I don't have muscles anymore." Yet another Omega Man says, "My bones, I think I'm puking up my own bones," as we see him doing exactly that, and it is gnarly. The last surviving Omega Man then tries to run away, saying, "Omega strike force to base, immediate evac needed. Primus, do you copy?" But it's too late, and he too gets shot with a blast from Brainiac. This makes his hands start to grow monstrously as weird orbs also start popping up around him and sticking to his body. It's then on the next page that Brainiac fully reveals himself, looking like a Frankenstein Clone Wars era Darth Maul hybrid. And he just stands there saying, "I'll take it from here." Brainiac's journal entries then begin to tell us, sunrise today was 6:44 a.m. at 104 degrees east. Average morning temperature was 35 degrees Celsius. Between 9:17 and 9:23 a.m., I killed 3 people and dismembered a 4th. The average afternoon temperature was 41 degrees Celsius. And we're reading all this as we see the last Omega Man he dismembered was screaming in pain in front of him. We then see that Brainiac has brought this Omega Man back to his lab, where he is experimenting on him and dissecting him, literally taking his limbs apart, connecting them with all sorts of wires and alien tech. He even removes his brain and places it in a jar of liquid above his head, connecting it to him with various wires. And as all of this is going on, Brainiac tells him, "I wouldn't advise any wiggling in your condition. I took the liberty of, well, I tend to tinker when I'm feeling anxious. It's the darn Superman problem that's got me." He then turns to his shrunken cities that he's been keeping in glass cylinders and picks one up, saying, "Useless fleas, a lot of you. Bottled cities from a dozen galaxies, and not one of you sludge-brained imbeciles knows a thing? I'll turn your air to acid and boil you alive by the billions. I'll starve you until you eat your own children. Tell me who he is. Who is Superman?" He then begins to shake one of the bottles while saying, "Well, speak up." But the people inside just scream, saying, "We know nothing, Almighty Lord Brainiac. Please don't." But he ignores their pleas and smashes the glass jar on the ground as if dropping an ant farm. He then starts stepping on all the shrunken beings, saying, "Maggots, morons." From there, he collects himself and apologizes to the Omega Man he's torturing and experimenting on, saying, "My apologies. I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm afraid I can lose my mind a bit when I'm angry. I've tried carving the offending parts out of my brain, but I suppose I'll have to keep digging." And if it hasn't already been twisted enough up to this point, he is scratching his exposed brain like a zombie while saying all of this. This Frankenstein-like version of Brainiac then continues to say, "Once I've solved this Superman-shaped puzzle, that is." That's what they call him. This boy who bends steel and leaps through clouds. But no one knows who he is or where he comes from. And Ra's al Ghul is growing impatient. The Omega Man on the surgical table then just moans in pain as Brainiac says, "Yes, it does seem to help when I, well, you know, I haven't always had someone like you, someone I could talk to." Now, all of this together really paints the picture that this Absolute Brainiac is completely insane. Dude's just sitting in the corner venting to someone he is actively torturing, even to the point of telling him it's nice to have someone to talk to. It's just nuts. Anyway, as we turn the page, we are then taken back many years in the past, where we get the origin of this Absolute Brainiac. It takes us to the moment where this version of Brainiac comes to life for the very first time, with his superior telling him, "You are Brainiac 419,730. 732. You serve the Collective. Absolute Brainiac then replies, the Collective? What is? But his superior interrupts, saying only level 88 effectors and above are allowed to seek knowledge beyond what they are endowed with at creation. Absolute Brainiac then says, I see, and may I ask what level am I? The superior hands him a shovel while saying, 0. You work here. You are never to leave this room. Your function is to dispose of refuse by shoveling it into the liquidator. This concludes the extent of your acquired knowledge. Do you understand your function as I have explained it to you, Brainiac 419-732? But Absolute Brainiac asks, refuse? What is refuse? To which the superior turns around and says they are, as we see a massive mound of thousands, if not millions, of dead Brainiacs piled up in what seems like a junkyard of sorts. Absolute Brainiac then asks, they are not Brainiac? To which his superior responds, not anymore. Begin shoveling. You're already behind schedule. Absolute Brainiac then says, Brainiac, my work shift, how long does it last? And before leaving, his superior says, for as long as you do. From here, we are taken through a series of panels that show this Absolute Brainiac's entire existence made up of just shoveling dead Brainiacs from around the galaxy into an incinerator or liquidator, which is exactly what was explained to him. But by day 2844, one of the other Brainiacs, or pieces of refuse that he's supposed to shovel into the liquidator, starts to crawl out from amongst the rest, saying, I am Brainiac 8,238,759. I stab, I kill. To which Absolute Brainiac replies, I'm sorry, I am Brainiac 419,732. I shovel. Followed by using his shovel to cut the other Brainiac's head in half. So what we're learning here is that there are a bunch of different Brainiacs from around the multiverse, literally millions, as the one he just killed was numbered over 8 million. But Absolute Brainiac is number 0, the least important of the bunch and the one who's made to dispose of all these failed or killed Brainiacs. You can think of him kind of like the grunt or the blue-collar bottom of the tier Brainiac, much like Absolute Superman was on Krypton. He and his family were also considered to be amongst the lower class on Krypton, unlike the Science League, who were considered to be the elites. So it gives a nice little comparison between the two characters. In any case, by day 13,638, we see that Absolute Brainiac is still shoveling the refuse into the liquidator while saying, thank you for agreeing to see me. I know I'm only a level 0 effector, but I appreciate you recognizing the quality of my labor and allowing me this chance to present a query, esteemed Brainiacs of the Collective. My question is, am I refuse? But as he's saying this, we see that he's only talking to several dead Brainiac bodies that he's propped up. And he's talking to them as if they are the Collective, telling us he's been in this room for 13,000 plus days and doing the same thing over and over again, and it's clearly messed up his mind. Because at this point, he's talking to corpses, which explains the behavior we saw at the beginning of the issue. He then continues this pretend conversation as he says to himself, yes, I see. That's an interesting perspective, Brainiac. I suppose you're right. I am rather special, aren't I? How amusing. You always say the most humorous things, Brainiac. Thank you, Brainiac of the Collective. Thank you for being my friends. So again, this dude has completely snapped at this point, and you can't really blame him. But from here, we jump all the way to day 49,901 as we see Absolute Brainiac has no more refuse left to throw into the liquidator. It seems that his job is finally complete. So he goes to the doors that have kept him locked away for almost 50,000 days and taps on the door saying, hello? Is anyone out there? There hasn't been any refuse in a long while. Should I? But when no one responds, he uses his shovel to pry open the doors, and as he walks out, he says, hello? Brainiac? And as he explores the ship, he sees all these shrunken cities and hanging bottles above him. He also sees other Brainiacs that aren't yet alive in pods. But when he finally makes his way to the cockpit, he realizes he's been on a massive ship this entire time. The now shocked Brainiac then sees his superior from day 1 sitting in a pilot's chair, and he says, greetings, are you Brainiac 1? But when he walks over to him, he sees that he is dead and asks, no, you are more refuse. And I am Brainiac. I am Brainiac. Because at this point, he realizes he is the one and only Brainiac left on the ship. Narration from Absolute Brainiac then begins to tell us, that day I shoveled my last piece of refuse, then officially promoted myself to level 100 effector. But mostly, I remember seeing the stars for the very first time and staring at them until my eyes began to melt. Staring and wondering what else was out there. From here, we return to Absolute Brainiac in the present, where he continues to say, in the days since, I've carved my mark across the face of creation, across countless worlds. I have sometimes paused to consider the possibility that it would have been better for everyone, me included, if I stayed in that room with the shovel. But where would the fun be in that? And again, we see that he is saying all of this to the Omega Man that he is experimenting on. He then walks over to him saying, I suppose there's nowhere else to turn now, is there? Time to be brave. I'd like to thank you for being here with me for this period, for supporting me in such a difficult moment. Now, contacting the Brainiac Collective. Okay, so this next part is pretty interesting because we learn that while this absolute version of Brainiac was floating through space on this ship all those years, what turns out to be the iconic Skull ship, and despite the fact that he was the last remaining Brainiac on that ship, he is never connected to the multiversal collection of Brainiacs called the Brainiac Collective. That is, until now. And on the next page, we see him standing in front of a bunch of screens as he summons a meeting of the Brainiac Collective for the first time. One by one, the other Brainiacs start to check in, and one of them aggressively asks, "Who called this meeting?" To which Absolute Brainiac nervously replies, "I did." He then tells them, "I submit to the collective data related to a humanoid identified locally as Superman. The dossier I have uploaded includes chemical analysis of a red dust left in his wake. This Brainiac is requesting any and all possible leads related to the subject's identity and/or planet of origin, please." One of the members of the Brainiac Collective then replies, "Superman, what is this idiocy? These readings cannot be accurate. No being in the known universe possesses this manner of abilities. And all the universe is known to the collective. Perhaps he is one of the adepts of Oa. You should send your inquiries to the Black Stars and never again waste the time of this collective with such." But before he could finish that sentence, one of the female Brainiacs speaks up and says, "Krypton, a planet in the Rao sector. The only habitable orb to survive that withering red sun. Your dust sample matches Krypton's thermal signature." This prompts Absolute Brainiac to respond, "I see. And what is known of this Krypton?" She then tells him only that it was and that it is no more. Krypton exploded. No Brainiac ever set foot upon the planet. It never warranted the interest of the collective. Whoever its people were, they never even managed to develop interstellar travel. But this Brainiac did recently visit the former site of Krypton, where I retrieved samples of its meteoroid remains. They display a rather exquisitely virulent range of radioactivity, now transmitting the sample's elemental composition. Then, as the data comes across his screen, Absolute Brainiac's eyes just light up and he says to himself, "Oh my." However, another Brainiac from the collective then chimes in and asks, "I have a query of my own. Who in the name of Kalu called this meeting? Unknown Brainiac, identify yourself." But Absolute Brainiac now had everything he needed from them, so he turns away from the screens and ends the transmission. From here, Brainiac wastes no time and immediately uses the elemental composition he received to start printing a sample. After which, he turns to the Omega Man he's torturing and says, "Thank you, my friend. You've been very helpful. You're a good listener. But now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." And with that, he finally kills the Omega Man by smashing his brain on the floor. And now, with the elemental printing complete, Brainiac prepares to run tests and says, "I want to know how the Krypton meteorite interacts with the dust from Superman's cape," and then sends someone in here to clean up this refuse. As several Brainiac androids he's created respond by saying, "Yes, Brainiac." At the same time, we also see that he's holding the synthetic kryptonite he just created, and as he stares at it, narration from his journal really drives home how twisted this Brainiac is as it reads, "Tonight's sunset will come at 5:26 p.m. at 257 degrees west. At 8:35 p.m. I will command one of my Brainiacs to immolate himself so I may spend 3 minutes watching him die, watching a piece of myself as it blackens and shrivels. Saturn will be visible in the night sky at 9:03 p.m. So yeah, I'm sure he's a blast at parties." Anyway, it's also important to note that the synthetic kryptonite he printed based on the elemental composition of real kryptonite may work differently than the real thing. So while this lab-created version will probably still harm Superman, its effect might not be as potent as real kryptonite. Or maybe it'll be worse. We'll have to wait and see. But on the last page of the issue, it's revealed that Brainiac has also captured Peacemaker Smith. And as he walks into the room, he tells Smith he is an alien, not even of this world. "Tell me, Peacemaker Smith, how does that make you feel?" But the Peacemaker just screams in pain as Brainiac's robots perform the implantation of some sort of armor or robotics onto him. Brainiac then continues to say, "Good, pain is progress. Your implants are responding nicely." To which Smith responds, "What is this? Punishment for Pakistan? Just kill me already." But Brainiac just gets close to his face and tells him, "Quite the contrary, Peacemaker. Director Al Ghul was very impressed with your work in the field. You're being trusted with a very special deployment to what is soon to be the most dangerous war zone on the planet, a place called Kansas." And on the final panel, we get a close-up of Brainiac's creepy smile as a droid approaches the surgical table with a weapon and kryptonite bullets. So on top of another reference to the role of Ra's al Ghul in this universe, it seems as if if Brainiac is turning Peacemaker Smith into this world's version of Metallo. At least that seems like a fair bet. And if that's the case, it would be wild. Either way, with that, Absolute Superman issue 7 comes to an end. Like I said earlier, this was another solid issue from Jason Aaron, and it was a smart move to dedicate this entire issue to this Brainiac's origin story, because Brainiac is not only one of Superman's most important and popular villains, they've also been slowly building him up over the previous 6 issues as a deeply menacing figure. So to take an entire issue to highlight him and pay all of that off with a truly twisted version of the character was perfect. The Absolute universe just continues to be amazing overall, and we will continue to cover each of the titles as they roll into their next story arcs. In fact, the next major story arc in the Absolute Superman title, which is going to focus on Brainiac bringing the war to Smallville, starts in issue 8 in early June. But now it's your turn to sound off. What do you guys think of Absolute Brainiac? Let us know down in the comments section. Otherwise, we'll see you next time when we talk about Ultimate Wolverine.